Matthew describes two groups of people who encountered an angel at Jesus' tomb. One group was two women, Mary and Mary, who came to the tomb to view the tomb, it says. And the other group was the guards who were put there to make sure that the disciples do not steal the body of Jesus. So both groups saw the angel, and they had different responses. We saw what had happened to the two women, in last week's reading, but that part is also read today to contrast them with the guards. But because we read about the women last week, we will focus more on the guards today. But we will still review what happened with these women. They saw the angel, and the angel spoke to them about Jesus' resurrection. And the angel also commanded them to tell the disciples about Jesus' resurrection. So they became the angels themselves, because the angel in the literal meaning means messengers. So they are the messengers of the messenger from God. And they were running to the disciples because they believed in the words of the angel, and they obeyed the words of the angel. And it was that time that they met Jesus. And it says before they met Jesus, they were filled with fear and joy. But when they met Jesus, their joy was increasing, because the words that Jesus said, the greetings he gave, which was translated as simply as greetings in our translation, but actually literally it means rejoice. Jesus told them to rejoice. And so they were joyful because they saw Jesus. As our psalm says, in your presence is the fullness of joy. So when Jesus is present with us, there is joy. And that's what these women experienced. And now we turn to the guards. It says, as women were on their way. So Matthew really wants to contrast between the guards and the women. So that's why he introduced the guards part with these words, as women were on their way. Some of the guards came into the city and reported to the chief priests everything that had happened. Some of the guards came, and when he says some, it means more than one person. There should be at least two guards who were going there. And if there's some of the guards came, then there are those who didn't come. So there should be at least 3 guards who are watching over the tomb. But when you say some, it's more than usually 2. And if they say some of, there are more likely that there are others who didn't go. So I just suppose at least about 10 people who are watching over the tomb, and thus saw the angel. And it says they report to the chief priest. So they were doing the right thing, just as the women were doing the right thing, because women were told to tell the disciples. They were not told to tell anybody, but still they knew that it was their duty to tell the chief priests, because chief priests are the ones who put them there. So they have to report to their superiors. So they were doing the right thing. And they reported everything that had happened, all the details, including the earthquake, the angel coming and rolling the stone. So they probably saw the inside of the tomb, and the tomb was empty, all the details. What they might have not told was the angel's words to the women, because when it seems that when angel speaks to certain people, maybe other people do not hear what the angel says. So they might not have what angel said, but they reported whatever they saw at least. So, because they reported to the high priest, now there are also two groups of people who heard from the witnesses of the angel. The disciples and the high priest. We will actually read about the disciples more on the Trinity Sunday. Our lectionary gave that part to the Trinity Sunday. But for now, we are reading about this high priest. It says, after the priests had assembled with elders and agreed on a plan. So it was right thing for them to consult the elders, because in the face of some extraordinary things that we face, it is right that we have wide consultations. Consultations are usually good things. It was right for them to consult the elders, but what they consulted them for wasn't right. They were consulting them to make a plan. They were not really interested in finding out what really happened. If there's an empty tomb, they should really wonder about, did Jesus really rise? They didn't care. What they cared was, what should we do at this situation? Unfortunately, this seems to be human tendency at every age. When you explain about these things, and let's say about the Bible, and just give the Bible stories and everything, some people will say, oh, we don't want to hear about all these things. Let's just tell me what to do. Tell me what to do. That's the only important thing. That's not the right attitude. But isn't that the attitude of whole society? Our education system, for example, seems to be more interested in giving skills than just giving the facts or the truth. Just say what is really there is more of a secondary. What you can do is more of a, what you should do at each certain situation is what they want to teach more. Business people, they are more interested about how to earn money, not about, am I doing the right thing? Or the politicians, they seem to be more interested about getting more votes, how to get more votes, rather than, is this the right policies, right, good for something good for the country? That seems to be their main occupation, and these high priests were not exceptions. But they were especially interested in their own interests. Because if Jesus had really risen, because he is risen in that reason, then he must be the Messiah, then they should relinquish the power as the high priest. Because high priests were now seen as the leaders of all Jewish people at that time. But when the Messiah comes, they have to give that power over to Messiah, the king. So they didn't want the Messiah to come. So the news that Jesus might have risen for them is not good news for them. So their mind is occupied thinking, how can we make sure that it is not known if Jesus is indeed risen? So the answer to this question is this. They gave the soldiers a large sum of money and told them, say this, his disciples came during the night and stole him while we were sleeping. So their solution was inventing a lie. And they spent a big sum of money, probably from people's offerings, because they are priests, to spread this lie through the soldiers. So behind that is a philosophy. What works is more important than the truth. What works comes before the truth. Or what works is the truth. It's another way to put it. And our modern philosophy often falls onto that as well. And it works for their interest. So they just had to follow these thoughts, this scheme, this plan. What about the soldiers? It says the soldiers took the money and did as they were instructed. So the soldiers had the same philosophy. What works for me is the good thing. Because for them, what was their interest? Getting more money. Big sum of money. Maybe it was a sum of money that could just change their life entirely. Big sum of money? Of course I can tell lies about this. Doesn't matter whether Jesus is indeed risen or not. What matters for me is to get more money. And in doing that, they were risking some big punishments, possibly death penalty. Because for Roman soldiers, to sleep during the duty was a big offense. But the priests have promised them that they will somehow deal with this situation with the governor. The governor will not punish you. We will make sure that the governor doesn't punish you, probably again by bribing. The reading means. So they just trusted the priest and didn't mind taking this risk. Then there's also a third group of people here, not mentioned in our reading, but comes right after our reading. The people who believed in this report, people who believed in this lie. And it was a little bit very naive of them, maybe, to believe in this lie, because if they were thinking more carefully, they would easily know that this was a lie. Because the lie said, while we were sleeping, they came and stole the body. If they were sleeping, how do they know that this happened? Either they were not sleeping, or they were sleeping and didn't know what happened. That makes sense. But they were sleeping, but know exactly what happened. Furthermore, I said there should be about maybe 10 guards or so. Is it really possible that all of them were sleeping at the same time when they were taking guards? Very unlikely. And let's say that it is possible. How did the disciples know that this is the time when the guards will be all sleeping? So it is the right time for them to come and say, okay, the guards will be all sleeping now, so let's go and steal the body, when they were really afraid of the soldiers now that Jesus had been crucified. But they still believed in this very unlikely lie because they wanted to believe. Because they didn't want to be at odds with other people, other Jewish people. Because if the priests want them to believe this way, then if they believe otherwise, they will be at odds and they might be ostracized by the whole society. Indeed, the early Christian history shows that early Christians were persecuted by the Jews. So you can see why the Jews wanted to really believe that Jesus had not risen. Because that was easy for them to believe that way. They didn't want big change in their life, losing many things. So it was a comfortable thing to believe that Jesus had not risen. And indeed, that's what's happening in our time as well. There are some people who say that we cannot really believe in the resurrection, Jesus' resurrection, because resurrection will never happen. That's not really scientific. But these are only minority of people who do not believe. Because most people are willing to just give exceptions to science. But these people do not believe. Most people, the majority of people who do not believe because they don't want the change in their life. They like the status quo. If you believe in Jesus' resurrection, then you have to make lots of sacrifices because Jesus demands something good from you. And you might be ridiculed by others because others will say, how do you believe? Why do you believe in such and such things? And there might be other changes. In other words, they have the same philosophy as their high priests, soldiers, and the Jews who believed in these reports. what works is what is good. What works for me is the truth. But what they don't realize is that these things might work for them for a while, but the truth will prevail eventually. Jesus has promised that he will come back and he will judge the world. So only those people who stand on the truth will be on the good side at the judgment day. Only when you believe in the right things, you will be on the right side. So, let us be on the right side, believing in the right things. Because not only are they good things, but it brings joy. As the women had great joy when they saw Jesus, we also will have great joy when we see Jesus. So believing in the resurrection might not seem to bring us great benefit at our present, but it will eventually. So let us hold on to this truth rather than following the path of those people who believe that what works is what is true. But let us hold on to the truth and say what the truth will work for us eventually. Glory be to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.